Hello everybody, welcome back to Reading for Vocabulary. We're on Unit 5, we're talking about cycles. Not your bicycle, but something that repeats like a circle, like the wheels on your bicycle. They go around and around and they begin again and again. So that's what we're talking about with cycles. In Lesson 13, we're talking about the world's greatest traveler. Now you're probably thinking the world's greatest traveler. Is it Marco Polo? No, it's not a person, it's a thing. We're going to focus on the cycle of water, and we're going to see how water is the world's greatest traveler, because water really travels a lot, and it travels in a cycle. It goes around and around. Well, we'll explore that idea later on in the reading passage. But of course, as usual, we need to learn some vocabulary first to better understand the reading passage. So let's get started with the vocabulary. The first word is defined as a series of events that is repeated a number of times. Now you've probably seen these types of pictures before. We can see a tree in different stages, and we know, right, that this is spring, this is summer, this is fall, and this is winter. And we might think, well, seasons, but we're saying a series of events that is repeated a number of times. It's not just the seasons. The seasons is an example of this. But what are we talking about? We're talking about a cycle. It's like I talked about before, right? On your bicycle, right, you have two wheels. Well, think about one wheel. It starts here and it goes around and it comes back to the beginning, right? It's a cycle. It's a series of events that is repeated. So it goes around, right? It starts here, maybe in spring, goes around to summer, then to fall, then to winter, and it comes back to spring. So the seasons is a type of cycle, and there are many types of cycles in the world around us. We'll talk about one in the reading passage. Okay, word number 2. Water that falls from the sky. So you're probably thinking about rain, right? You know this word, rain. That's an easy word. But there's another word that we use for rain that's longer. It's more of a scientific word, and I'm sorry, it's kind of long, right? Precipitation. Precipitation. Wow, so many syllables. There's 5 syllables. So let's say it fast. Well, slow first and then fast. Precipitation. Precipitation. One more time. Precipitation. Okay? So if you say it quickly, it sounds like precipitation. Okay? Precipitation just means rain. It's more of a scientific word for rain. Okay, let's move on to number 3. The process of water collecting together in the air. So the process of water collecting together in the air. Now you're probably thinking, what is this? It's a cloud. But we're not talking about a cloud. We're not talking about the grouping of moisture in the air. We're talking about the process of, and there's a special word for that. We call that condensation. Oh, big words in this lesson, right? So let's do this slowly. Condensation. Condensation. Faster. Condensation. Condensation. Okay, so condensation is a process. It's the process of water collecting together in the air. And clouds are formed because of condensation. So if you think, how do clouds appear in the sky? It's because of condensation. So condensation is the process. Okay, let's move on. For a liquid to be taken into the air. This is a sad picture, right? This little boy, he wants to go swimming, but there's no water in the swimming pool. What happened to the water in the swimming pool? Well, it evaporated. right? Evaporate is a verb. It's also a process, right? It's the process of a liquid to be taken into the air. On a hot day, if you have a dish of water or there's a puddle of water on the ground, well, after some time in the hot day, that water will disappear, right? In the summertime, you look at the streets, they're very dry. A truck comes by and sprays water on the streets, but after a little while, the water is gone. The street is very dry again because of evaporation. Okay, so evaporation makes the water go into the air, and then when the air is cool, the water gets together and condensation happens. Okay, so first evaporation, then condensation. We'll talk about those later, but we need to know about those words. Okay, next one. 5, to suck up or drink in. To suck up or drink in is to absorb. Absorb. Okay, we're doing some a little bit difficult words in this lesson, right? Now, of course, if you spill something, you can use a paper towel to absorb the liquid that you spilled on the table. Okay, so you can use a paper towel. And paper towels, the companies that make paper towels will boast, they will brag, they'll say, our paper towels have great absorption power, right? They will absorb a lot of liquid to take in or to suck up or to drink in or to take in. Okay. Oh, he's happy. To become aware. To become aware of something is to realize. It looks like he had, oh, I have an idea, right? It's like, bing, a light bulb goes on over his head. He realizes something. He became aware of something. A lot of famous inventors or scientists, there's stories about them, coming to a moment of realization, right? Like the famous Greek philosopher who sat in a bathtub and said, oh, eureka, right? And realized he could use the water, the weight of an object in the water to realize how much volume it had, okay? So to realize, it's like the moment you understand something. Next one. For a liquid to move together in a single direction. For a liquid, any liquid to move together, and a lot of liquid moving together in one direction. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could be a cup of water, but if you spill it, it moves in a direction. This stream, of course, is moving in a direction downhill. What is it doing? It is flowing. Flow is a verb, to flow. So this small stream is flowing quickly, right? Because maybe it's kind of a not very steep, but it's not flat. It's there's uphill and then downhill, and the water will flow quickly downhill. So this is a very active stream, right? Okay. Next one, greatly needed or necessary. Greatly needed or necessary is essential. If something is essential, you really need it. For example, we think of when we think of essential, it's like things that we need to continue to survive, like food. Food is essential. Air, oxygen is essential. If we don't have it, we'll die, right? So we greatly need it. It's very necessary. It's essential. Okay. Next one, 9. Whoa. Looks like he's on vacation at a resort. A large cloth used for drying. So what do we call this cloth? You probably take it to the beach with you, or you take it when you go swimming. You use it when you take a shower or a bath. It's called a towel. A towel. So if you're in an English-speaking country and you want a cloth to dry yourself off, you can ask, is there a towel, please? Or can I get a towel? Okay, next one. A flow of water used to clean oneself. I just mentioned this word. After you do this, you need a towel. Remember what I said? I said when you take a shower. When we use the word shower, we use it in a larger expression, very commonly, take a. Take a shower. We also use take a bath. Okay? Now, what's the difference between a shower and a bath? Well, you see this boy here, the water is falling from the faucet above. It's falling on him like rain. That's a shower. But a bath is where you have a bathtub and you sit in the water, right? And the water's already there and you clean yourself with the bath water. It's kind of like when you go to a sauna, right? It's kind of like a big bath, right? And you get in the sauna. But a shower is like this style. So, but we use take a shower, take a bath, okay? You should take a shower every day. You should take a shower after you exercise. Remember to do that, right? If you don't take a shower, ooh, some nimse is there, right? Okay, next one. 11, a collection of water high up in the sky. We talked about this before, right? I gave you the word before. It's a cloud, right? So this airplane is flying over these clouds. It's very beautiful. If you're ever in an airplane very high up in the sky, look out the window and you can see the clouds below you. It looks like land, but it's very fantastic, right? Very beautiful, very white, and looks very clean. Okay, next one. Not moving. So this lake, the water in this lake is what? It is very still. Still, we can also say calm. Still or calm. Calm means there's no motion, right? This is very peaceful, calm. The water is still, no movement, okay? It's a very beautiful picture. Next one, a very tiny bit of water. So a very tiny bit of water, what do we call that? We call it a droplet. A droplet, it's like a little ball of water, right? When we just drop a little bit of water on something, or when it rains just lightly, not a lot, but the water will collect in little drops, and we call them droplets. There's one droplet, two droplets. You could also, of course, just say a drop of water, but sometimes people will say droplet. Okay, next one. A small pool of water is a puddle. So you like to go splashing through the puddles, right? Okay. This girl, of course, she's wearing good shoes for that. Don't do that if you're wearing shoes and socks. Your mother will be angry, right? But if you're wearing sandals or rubber shoes like she's wearing, no problem. Have fun, right? Go running through the puddles of water. Kids like to do that. Okay, next one. Icy rain. It's rain, but it's really cold. So it becomes icy. It's almost freezing. We call that sleet. So sleet is, it's not snow, it's not rain, but it's like almost a combination of both. It's where it's really cold and it's raining and it's almost icy, right? So it's icy rain, it's sleet. Now sleet is dangerous because on the roads we have to be very careful because as you know, ice is mikroa, right? It's slippery, right? So you have to be careful when it's sleet outside. You also have to be careful when you're walking. Okay, next one. For a liquid to absorb into something. When a liquid absorbs, we heard this word before, right? We talked about the paper towel, right? The paper towel will clean up the liquid. It will absorb into the paper towel. We say it's soaked, right? If you are soaked, right? It's raining really hard, like in the summertime. You go outside and you don't have an umbrella. You don't have a raincoat. You're just wearing normal clothes. What happens? You get water everywhere, in your hair, on your shirt, under your shirt, on your underwear is completely wet. Your socks in your shoes, when you're walking, right? It makes a noise. You are soaked, right? So people will say, I am soaked. It means I got water everywhere, right? I have to take everything off, take a hot shower, and then dry off because I'm soaked, okay? So to soak is for liquid to completely absorb into something. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be you, your skin, right? It could be a paper towel. It could be a dog, whatever. The water has completely gotten in and onto something. That's to soak. Okay, next one. Well, not next one. We need to look at the words. Let's check the words that we just learned. Make sure that we remember those and how they are used. So let's go over the different problems here. Number one, I just beep that I forgot to do my homework. So you just, what? It's like you have an idea. And what is that? I just A, made, B, realized, C, spent, D, absorbed. So in this case, right, we could use a word that means that you had a sudden idea. You suddenly became aware of the fact that you forgot to do your homework. Has that ever happened to you? It's not a good feeling. Oh my gosh, right? It's at the beginning of the lesson, the beginning of the class, and you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, there was homework yesterday. The teacher gave us homework and I forgot. Suddenly you have that idea. That means you realized. I just realized. Oh, I just thought. I just remembered. I just realized that I forgot to do my homework. Not made, not spent, not absorbed. Those don't make sense. Realized. You suddenly became aware of that fact. Okay, number 4. Birth and death are part of the beep of life. Think about that. Birth is at the beginning, right? A person lives their life, right? And then they die. Now, of course, for an individual person, for one person, it's not a continual process. But if that person is born, they grow up, they have a baby, right? That person is born and they grow up. So it's like it goes around in a circle, right? So what do we call that? Birth and death are part of the what of life? End, beginning, C, cycle, D, loss. Remember, you have a beginning and then an end and then it starts again, right? Well, life continues, right? Not for the individual person, unfortunately, right? It's like a straight line, birth and then death. But if we're talking about all things like human beings, right? People are born, they die, more people are born, they die. It goes around in a continual process. So we call that what? We call it a cycle. That's what I talked about before, right? Birth and death are part of the cycle of life. Okay? If you watch The Lion King, maybe an older movie, maybe you haven't seen it, but at the beginning they talk about the circle of life. That's the same idea. It's the cycle of life. They're talking about constant death and constant renewal, constant death and constant birth. It goes in a cycle, the circle of life. There's a song associated with that. Okay, but it's not the end of life because birth continues. It's not the beginning because that's only one part, and it's not the loss of life, it's the cycle. It goes again and again. Okay, next one. Number 5. When there is enough water in the sky, it will beep to form clouds. Now remember, before I talked about this. How are clouds formed? What is the process for forming clouds? Why are clouds formed? Because it precipitates? Because it rains? No. Because it flows, right? It will flow to form clouds. Water will flow in the sky. That's weird. That doesn't make sense. It will realize. Water can't think, right? It will condense. Condense to form clouds. Condensation is the reason that clouds are formed. If there's enough water in the sky, that water will gather together and form clouds. And we call that the process, we call it to condense, right? And we call it condensation. Okay. 7, here this tissue will beep the blood. So if you're bleeding, oh no, you have to absorb the blood, right? I just gave you the answer, right? This tissue will absorb the blood. You need to not drink it in, but you need to soak it in. You need to stop that blood. So you use a tissue or maybe a bandage to stop the blood. It will absorb the blood and then stop the bleeding. Absorb, not flow, not cut, not pinch, but to absorb the blood. Okay, well that wraps up the vocabulary section of our lesson today. Let's take a short break, come back, and we'll do the reading together, so don't go away. Okay, are you ready to begin the reading passage and find out more about the world's greatest traveler? Remember before I said the world's greatest traveler we're talking about rain, right? The cycle of rain. So let's find out more about this with the reading passage. Let's begin. So let's read together. Every day, millions of gallons of water flow into the oceans and lakes of the world. But the lakes don't flood and the oceans don't get higher. Where does all the water come from? Where does it go? So if you think about this, right, we have the rain, right, falling on the ground. It goes into the rivers and the streams. Those rivers and streams go into lakes and oceans. So we think, wow, all this water every day, all the time, is going into the lakes and oceans and lakes of the world. But the lakes don't flood, do not flood. They don't flood, they don't become too big. And the oceans don't get higher, right? You go to the beach, it comes up, but it goes down. It doesn't get higher. People build their houses on the beach, and those houses aren't underwater. But the water keeps flowing into the oceans. So we have questions. Where does all the water come from? First of all, where's all this water coming from? And second, where does it go? Why doesn't it make the lakes get bigger and bigger and bigger? What's going on? Okay, well, that's what this passage is about. The answers are next. Water never stays still. It moves around the earth in a process called the water cycle. This process is essential to the survival of every living thing on earth. Okay, so what we find out here is that water doesn't stay in the same place. It's constantly moving. So even if we look at that lake, even though we look at the ocean and we think the water stays there, it doesn't. The water's always moving. It's always moving from one place to another. Sometimes we can see it, right? We can see it as rain, it's moving. We can see it in rivers or streams. Yeah, we can see it moving. In lakes, though, we don't really see it moving, but it is still moving, right? And it's moving in the water cycle, right? In a cycle. It has a beginning, it goes around, has an end, and then begins again, right? This process, this cycle is essential. It's necessary for the survival of every living thing on earth. That means we need it. People need it. Animals need it. Plants need it. Everything that lives needs the water cycle. If there was no water cycle, we cannot survive. We would die. Okay? So, this is the water cycle. Okay? It'll explain it a little bit more, but this is a good diagram. This is a good drawing to show us the circle of water. Okay, so first, let's begin with rain. Let's begin over here. It doesn't matter, by the way, on a cycle, it doesn't matter where you begin, right? It doesn't matter. There's really no beginning, no end. It just keeps going around and around. But just for our example, let's start here, okay? So we start here with dark clouds, right? These clouds are really dark, and the rain starts to fall, as we can see. And it falls onto the ground, and it goes into puddles, and maybe it goes into streams, and it collects here, right? Well, after a while, right, the sun comes out, the sun's shining down, right, and it makes that water go back up into the sky. Now, this is the part we can't see. You really can't see evaporation most of the time. We don't see it because the water parts are so small, it's so hot and it's so small, it goes up. We can feel it when it gets humid, right? Right? In the summertime, we feel a lot of moisture in the air. So we can feel it, but we can't see it, okay? Well, that's evaporation. So it goes up and it rises up in the sky. And then condensation happens. It condenses into clouds. And at first, it just makes white, fluffy clouds. They're very white and beautiful. But as more and more water gathers together, the clouds get darker and darker. And suddenly, the clouds are so full of water, they're almost black. And when that happens, the water begins to fall. And you can see our cycle here, right? You can see it starts over again. So the water falls as precipitation or rain, and it falls, and then it starts again. So it doesn't matter where we start on this cycle, right? It constantly is going, right? Water never stays still. It is constantly moving. Very interesting, isn't it? Okay, let's continue. You might not realize it, but the water cycle is happening all around you. Think of how you dry off after you take a shower, okay? So like I said, we might not realize it, especially because we can't see evaporation. We can't really see it. Sometimes we can feel it, right? But we don't normally see it. Maybe sometimes you can see it with steam, but usually we don't see it. But the water cycle, it's happening all around us, all the time. There's moisture in the air right now, right? Except, if you go to a very dry place, but even in the desert, there's a little bit of moisture in the air, right? I don't think air is really that 100%, no moisture. There's always a little bit of moisture in the air. Sometimes, though, the air feels very dry and our lips get cracked and our skin might crack because there's no moisture. But in other places, especially in jungles or tropical islands, there's a lot of moisture in the air and it's good for our skin. Anyway, think of how you dry off. For an example, another example, when you take a shower and you dry off, think about that, okay? You use a towel. After you take a shower, you dry off by using a towel, right? So you use a towel to absorb the water. So you use the towel and then the towel is wet. Before it was dry, but you rub it on your body, right? Now the towel is wet. So you hang it. You hang it up to dry. It dries in less than a day. Where does the water go? It evaporates. Okay, so in this example, right, we used a towel to dry our body. The towel is wet. We hang it up, right, to dry. And we come back after a day, the towel is dry. It dries in less than a day, right? You hang it up in the morning. You come back in the afternoon, the towel is dry. So we have a question. Where does that water go? Well, it evaporates, right? It goes out into the air. Usually, the hotter it is or the drier the air is, the faster it dries, right? In the winter in Korea, it seems like clothes dry quickly because the air is drier in the winter. In the summertime, it takes a little bit longer for your clothes to dry. Right? Okay, so your mom might put the clothes outside on the balcony to get some wind, right, to help them evaporate. But it takes longer for clothes to dry in the summertime than it does in the winter. Okay? And if you use the air conditioner, right, the air conditioner makes the air dry, so then it also helps dry out your clothes from your laundry. Okay, next one. Evaporation is why puddles dry up and why the oceans don't flood onto the land. Air picks up tiny droplets of water and carries them high into the sky. The droplets collect together in a step called condensation. Condensation. Okay, we talked about that before. Okay, so evaporation is why. That's the reason why puddles dry up. So if you look at a puddle in the summertime and then after a few hours, the puddle of water, right, on the street, it's gone, right? Well, evaporation is why that puddle dries up and why the oceans don't flood onto the land. You think, well, look at all these rivers going into the ocean, right? Why doesn't the ocean get bigger and bigger and flood all the land? Because of evaporation. That water is going up into the air. Air picks up tiny droplets of water. Actually, they're so small you can't see them really. Tiny droplets of water, and carries them high up into the sky, right? Really high up in the sky. So far, you really can't see what's going on. The droplets, but up in the sky, right, it gets cool. It's colder. And so those droplets gather together, right? They collect together, and we call that collecting together, we call that condensation. Okay? Condensation forms clouds. Look at the sky right before a storm. The clouds are dark. So much water has collected that it blocks the light. Okay? So much water has collected that it blocks the light. That's why they're dark. The water becomes too heavy to stay up in the air. It precipitates. It precipitates and it falls down. So, condensation, we talked about condensation when the water droplets get together. That's how clouds are formed, right? So condensation forms, makes clouds. So what they're saying here, this is like a command, look at the sky right before a storm. Apachane, right? Is that right? Oh, parochane, sorry. Parochane, right? Just before a storm, you look in the sky, the clouds get dark. Actually, it's kind of a feeling we have. If we're outside and it's a sunny day and all of a sudden it gets dark, we're like, uh-oh, it's going to rain, right? Because the dark clouds are moving in. We say, oh, it's going to rain. Let's go inside or let's get our umbrella, right? We shouldn't be outside. Because there's so much water, right? The clouds are dark. So much water has collected. It blocks the sunlight, right? And it looks dark. So the water is too heavy, right? There's so much water together. It's gathered together so much. It's too heavy. It can't stay in the sky. So what happens? It precipitates. It starts to fall as rain or snow, depending on how cold it is. But there are lots of different types of precipitation. The reason we use precipitates is because it can rain, it can snow, right? We also saw that it can sleet, right? Remember that word? There's another one, hail. Let's talk about that after a while. H-A-I-L, okay? Precipitation is just another name for water that falls out of the sky. Rain, snow, sleet, and hail are all different kinds of precipitation. So those four types of precipitation are how water falls from the sky. So that's why we use the word precipitation. Precipitation isn't just rain. It's, like I said, it's a scientific word, but it also means any type of water that falls from the sky. Many different forms, not just rain, but snow, sleet, and hail. They're all different kinds of precipitation. So we know what rain is, we know what snow, we know what sleet is. What about hail? Let's look at hail here for a minute. Okay, what does hail look like? If you can see it, do you see these white balls falling onto the ground? They're little pieces of ice, right? Now, thankfully, these little pieces of ice or hail, those are small. But imagine if they're big, right? In some places in America, maybe other parts of the world, I'm not sure, but in America, the hail can get to be this big. Imagine a piece of ice, not just one piece of ice, but many pieces of ice falling to the ground, right? That's dangerous. I've seen videos on YouTube. People were driving their car and these pieces of ice are hitting the window, the front window, the windshield of their car. It's cracking it, right? And it's banging their car. You don't want to be outside at that time. It could be very dangerous and it could hurt you. You could get injured. But anyway, sometimes it will hail. So those are all the different forms of precipitation. Rain, snow, sleet, and hail. Usually hail, though, is small like this. You know, it just might hurt you a little bit. It might feel strange, but it's not a big deal. It's strange to get the big balls of hail. So don't worry. Don't be too afraid. Okay? Especially in Korea, I've never seen hail very big. I think I have seen hail, but it's not that big, so don't worry. Okay. The falling water soaks into the trees, soil, and rocks. It collects into rivers and flows into the lakes and oceans. It evaporates again, and the water cycle starts all over. So, oh, right, we just talked about precipitation. Precipitation is falling water, whatever it is, rain, snow, sleet, or hail. It falls down, it gets on the ground, it soaks into the trees, right? The trees absorb the water. The soil, the ground will absorb the water. It soaks into the soil, and the soil is really wet. And even it goes into the rocks, right? And then it collects, right? It collects underground and it gets together and it collects into rivers, or it will flow on the top of the ground into the river, right? It flows into the lakes and oceans. And so the rivers will go into lakes and they'll go into oceans. Once they're in the lakes and oceans, though, they don't stay there, right? The lakes don't flood. The water evaporates. It goes up into the air again. And the water cycle starts all over. So it's a continual process. It goes around and around. Okay. Water moves through every living thing on this planet. This is another point too. Not all the water goes into the lakes and oceans, right? It moves through every living thing on this planet. Without clean water, we would die. The water cycle keeps our water fresh and clean. The next time you have a drink of water, just imagine all the places it has been. Ooh. Okay? Because water just doesn't go in this cycle without getting stopped some places. Think about your life. How much water do you drink every day? So sometimes water is collected and put into a nice, convenient drinking bottle for you, and you take a drink of water and it goes into your body. So you think about it. Next time, without clean water, if this water is dirty, I'll get sick. I need clean water, right? The water cycle keeps our water fresh and clean. So, you think about the water going into the ground, it gets dirty on the ground, right? But when it flows into the lakes and the oceans, then in the ocean, you can't drink the ocean water. There's too much salt. But when it evaporates, the salt doesn't come up. The salt stays in the ocean. The water is fresh when it's evaporated. And if you collect rainwater, the rainwater is clean. You can drink it, right? Of course, nowadays most people will use some other type of process. They'll make evaporation happen because they make it happen, and then they'll bottle water that way, or they'll filter it, right? But they make it fresh and clean. So next time you have a drink of water, though, think of all the places it has been. The water in this bottle has been around for a long, long time. It's probably been in a few oceans, a few lakes. It's probably been in a few animals, maybe other people, right? And it's passed through their bodies, out their body, and then back into the water stream. So you think about, oh, that's terrible, but it's clean, right? This water has been, I hope it's clean. No, I'm sure it's clean. So it's safe for you to drink. If we don't have it, we can't drink water. And without water, we would die. So the water cycle keeps our water fresh and clean. If we don't have clean water, without clean water, we would die. So we need our water to be fresh. Okay? So it's interesting. Even though our water is fresh, it's been to a lot of different places before, right? It changes. It constantly moves. Okay, let's do the comprehension questions and see how much we remember about this interesting story. Okay, this story is about, what's the main subject of this story? What is this story mostly about? A, how the earth moves water. B, how water moves around the earth. C, how big storms are made. How big storms are made, not small storms, but how big storms are made. And D, why water is so important. Why is water so important? Well, let's take a look at these. What was the main topic, right? Was it about how the earth moves water? Does the earth move water? No, the earth doesn't move water. That's not right. Was it about how water moves around the earth? Well, yeah, we're talking about that, right? We saw how water falls from the sky, goes into the ground, into lakes and streams, and then evaporates back up in the sky. So this story is about how water moves around the earth, up into the sky, onto the ground, then back up into the sky, right? How it moves around. It's not about how big storms are made, although we read about that. That was just one part of the reading passage. And D, why water is so important? Well, really, that was the last part of the reading passage, why water is so important for us. But the main topic was how water moves around the earth. Water is the greatest traveler. Okay, number 2. You hang up a wet towel, right? Remember the example we talked about? After you take a shower, you use the towel to dry, to absorb the water from your skin. Then you hang up the towel. Why do you hang up the towel? You hang up a wet towel so that it will absorb water. B, the water will evaporate. C, you can take a shower. D, it stays wet. So when we see so that, it's like asking why, right? Why? You hang up a wet towel, why? You hang up a wet towel so that it will absorb water. No, that doesn't make sense because we've already made the towel absorb water when we used it to clean our body. Now we're hanging it up, right? We don't want it to absorb any more water. We hang it up so that the water will evaporate, so that it will go away and our towel will be dry and we can use it the next day. That's the answer. You hang up a wet towel so that the water will evaporate. It will go away. Not so that you can take a shower. You've already taken a shower. Okay? And D, it stays wet. You hang up a towel so that it stays wet? That doesn't make sense. You hang up a towel so that it will become dry. The water will evaporate. Okay, number 3. Condensation happens when? When does condensation happen? A, water collects together in the sky. B, the oceans flood onto land. C, air picks up tiny droplets of water. And D, it rains, snows, sleets, or hail. What is the process of condensation? Do you remember that from the vocabulary and the reading? Condensation happens when water gathers together in the sky. That's A. Condensation happens when water collects together in the sky. That's the answer, not B, C, or D. Okay, number 4, precipitation. Remember many forms of precipitation: rain, snow, sleet, and hail. Precipitation, beep. A, is a name for water that collects in the sky. B, evaporates before it lands on the ground. C, is why the oceans flood. D, falls out of the sky. So what's true about precipitation? Is it a name for water that collects in the sky? No, it's not a name for water that collects in the sky. We call that clouds, those clouds, right? But it's before precipitation. Precipitation evaporates before it lands on the ground? No, not usually. Some of it does, but normally it doesn't. Rain and snow and sleet, it hits the ground. It lands, not before, it lands on the ground. We see it landing on the ground. Precipitation is why the oceans flood? No, the passage said the oceans don't flood. Why? Right? It's not because of precipitation. Because of evaporation. So that's not right. Precipitation falls out of the sky. Yes, because precipitation is rain, snow, sleet, and hail, and those types of water fall from the sky. So it's D. Precipitation falls out of the sky. That's the answer. Okay, well, it's very interesting to think about. We don't realize it, right? We just drink water and we just, go about our life. It rains. Maybe we don't think about it. But sometimes we think about it. We say, well, why is all this water going into the lakes and oceans? Why don't the lakes and oceans, get bigger and cover all the land? Well, now we know why it doesn't happen. We know that water travels in a big cycle. It's always moving, falling on the ground. Later it's evaporating into the air, and then it falls on the ground again. It's a big cycle, right? It's a circle of water. It's a cycle of water. Okay, very interesting lesson. Hope you've learned a lot. We'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody.